What I like to do now is to go into the story, which of course is the #1 story in Germany and in many non-German publications. England, of course, has been reporting about it. Even the United States of America has been reporting about it. When I say reporting, I put reporting in quotes. And this has to do with a conspiracy to overthrow the German government. You most certainly have heard about it, I would assume. We have several articles in our update this time, but we are going to have some more in the following update next week. Just to give you a very brief synopsis to begin with, the mass media reported that special forces in Germany have arrested 25 people suspected of supporting a domestic terrorism organization that planned to overthrow the government and form its own state, and that is according to the federal prosecutor. Now, let me remind you, it is an allegation by the federal prosecutor. Nothing has been proven. At this point, really nothing has been charged yet either. The article goes on to say that the special forces officers detained people believed to be members and supporters of the group. It goes on to say that the investigation has to do with forming or establishing and being part of a terrorist organization. That's all they are looking into at this point. It's not like there was an imminent threat of an overthrow. They don't even say that that is something they're looking into. But of course, you listen to the mass media, you hear these reports which are being disseminated, and you get the impression, oh, the whole group was trying to overtake the German government and establish their own state, and in the process they were willing to kill, mass murder many people, and that is the kind of impression you are getting when you listen to these reports. There's not too many critical voices, but there are some. NTV wrote on December 7, the idea that he, and they're talking about Henry VIII, Prince Reuss von Greiz, he allegedly is the ringleader, even though that is being questioned now, but the idea that he and his comrades in arms actually took power in the country seems absurd. And they talk about that this is really like a pipe dream and nothing to be really taken too seriously. Report 24 wrote on December 8 that they took 3,000, think about that, 3,000 police officers. They were allegedly needed to make 25 arrests in the pensioner milieu, in other words, where the people live who are old, like 70, old. The narrative of the media has reached such a level of absurdity that it shakes up believing citizens and encourages them to ask critical questions. Then last night, my mother called me, this author is writing here, completely upset and deeply concerned in a perception Germany narrowly escaped an attempted coup by a heavily armed right-wing extremist army of Reichsbürger, that's the name, controlled by Russia and Putin yesterday, which could only be stopped with great difficulty with almost 3,000 heavily armed special forces. That is the narrative which is being sent out. Now, when I heard about it the first time, I was having great difficulty believing any of it because it didn't sound right. It just did not sound right at all. Now, in the meantime, we got some more news. Die Welt wrote on December 9, after soldiers and a judge were also arrested. See, there is actually two judges. They were supposed to be part of that group, and then there are soldiers, and then there are some more I'm going to talk about in a moment. So they were arrested during the Reichsbürger raid. Federal Minister of the Interior, Nancy Fraser, wants to change the disciplinary law. Officials with subversion fantasies should in the future have to prove their innocence. And then the magazine says, an idea that gives a deep insight. You see, I'm not too much concerned about this group, whether they are in their own minds having been thinking of something. I'll talk about that in a moment, what has been the evidence so far. But I'm more concerned about the reaction. I'm concerned about the reaction by the mass media, by the politicians, and now by this attempt. And I was reading this morning that they actually are bringing it up now to the German parliament this week to change the law, to make it now that you have to prove your innocence, rather than the other side, the prosecutor has to prove your guilt. I mean, totally backwards, putting all of this on its head. But this is a kind of reaction, you see. That is what is very convenient for those in government, and also when it comes to the opposition, in light of the fact that more and more Germans are becoming quite concerned about the government and how effective they really are. That's a welcome detraction. Now, the whole thing was very predictable. Rather than being concerned, as I said, about the alleged planned Reichsbürger putsch, we should be concerned about the reaction by the German government, the opposition parties, and the mass media. One has to ask whether the entire raid was instigated by the police and the government to bring about their secret goals of suppressing dissenting and unpleasant voices, thereby attempting to abrogate constitutional rights and freedoms, as was done before with enacting unnecessary and illegal coronavirus restrictions. You remember that. There were restrictions which later the courts in Europe and in Germany in particular found to be illegal. But the government used police, heavily armed police, to enforce those restrictions against those who didn't want to abide. Compact TV reported on December 7 that the press was apparently informed about the raids ahead of time, some say at least a week ahead of time, so the journalists and cameramen could be present at the scene when 3,000 officers stormed about 100 premises of mostly elderly people to arrest 25 suspects. That's what they wrote. The BKA, which is the Federal Criminal Police Department, invents a Reichsbürger putsch that would be laughable if it were not that serious. During the night, probably the largest raid in Germany since the days of the RAF terror organization took place. Now that is something which was actually true. There was a terror organization in the 60s, and they went with weapons into banks, getting money so that they could buy more weapons. But even then, the problem was the Constitution was pretty much put on hold. For instance, attorney-client privilege was abrogated at the time. I still remember that very vividly. 3,000 officers were deployed to search over 100 apartments and objects, they say. But there's more. Built Online, the mass tabloid over there, it's something like the, you can look at some mass tabloids over here, and you know what I'm talking about. They have already put forth a chart of all the people who were supposedly part of that putsch, that planned putsch, which never took place. Now, on top, they put this Prince Heinrich Reuss, even though it's being questioned now that he is actually the one. They have in that list a judge, a lawyer, a person who is against Corona, the Corona restrictions. Oh, that's already something to behold, right? And then there are a few more, including an opera singer. And they give the name. So I went on YouTube yesterday and I wanted to find out more about this opera singer. And so, yes, he is an opera singer, trained opera singer. He is singing many religious songs in churches. Not the profile of a terrorist. You see, so I saw that. I said, oh, wait a minute, there's something really fishy about this whole thing. As I said, there are other articles we have, and we are going to publish them, pointing out that the press had been informed about the raids, planned raids, at least a week ahead of time, and they were given the addresses as to where the raids would be taking place, so that they all could be there and they could all, quote-unquote, report as to what is happening. And this one article by Neue Zürcher Zeitung says, even the prosecution doesn't say that the attack on the German state was going to take place immediately. They don't even say that. All they have, it appears, is some evidence that this person, apparently this count, put together a plan. I have a copy of this here. It's a plan by hand, written by hand. Very, very poorly written with all kinds of mistakes in grammar and in typography. And it's talking about storming the Reichstag with one BB gun. All right? He's going to be the next chancellor, according to this chart. We all have to buy unanimously tickets with cash to go to Berlin, but don't forget to wear a hat because it's very cold in Berlin. That's the kind of nonsense, right, which they have. And so this is the basis on which this raid of 3,000 police officers was taking place. Again, my concern is the reaction. What is the government going to do? How far are they willing to go? That is really where it all boils down to. Are we moving in Germany towards a dictatorship? As in a sense we've had it already during the coronavirus restrictions, like we still have it in Canada under Mr. Trudeau, who has a gall to take the position of the Chinese demonstrators against the government, whereas he is one of the greatest dictators in the Western nations. And so that's the question. Where are we going? We know ultimately Germany is going to become a dictatorship, and power is going to be given to the beast, a person of German, Austrian, in all likelihood German descent. How far are the people willing to go to accept that? I mean, you read the mass media over there, all the papers I've looked at, except for those very few I've just quoted. Oh, it's terrible, that the push, that's these right-wing radicals, and they were trying to take over the government. That's how it's being presented already. Without any basis, any facts, nothing. All we have is allegations, not proven. So again, I wanted to just point this out because unless we are careful and just read between the lines, we may hear these statements, we hear reports which I saw on Newsmax, which I saw on ABC News, and that's exactly how it was presented too, because they are just parroting what they are hearing from the German mass media. So it's always important to look at both sides, to wait until the facts become clear, because they are not clear at all at this point. One more thing I want to say before I close. An article was published this morning, according to which the Republican Party rescinded the COVID-19 vaccination mandate for the Army. So they are changing the National Defense Authorization Act. And it said that not later than 30 days after the date of the enactment of this act, which was apparently yesterday, the Secretary of Defense shall rescind the mandate that members of the armed forces be vaccinated against COVID-19 pursuant to the memorandum dated August 24, 2021 regarding mandatory coronavirus disease 2019 vaccination of Department of Defense service members. So allegedly, in 30 days, it's all over. But the article also points out that the Biden administration doesn't like it a bit. And Mr. John Kirby, the White House National Security Council coordinator for strategic communications, said that Secretary Austin has made it very clear that he is against this change, and so is the Biden administration, and they are thinking what they can do to prevent this change from taking place, because they still believe that it is definitely important for all Americans, and of course the Army as well, to be vaccinated against COVID-19 and to get boosted and booster shots. So that's where we are at this point. I'm not entirely sure with this law whether Mr. Biden has to sign it or whether it's already law. I couldn't find that one out, but I most certainly will implore that some more and explore that some more to see where we're going on that. If, in fact, this was a law which was enacted and which is going to become effective in 30 days, that would be great news. But we'll have to just wait and see as to how this is going to play out.